Lemonade by Valerie Howard. Narrated by L.H. Warren. Chapter 1. Katy craned her neck to scope out the length of dirt road stretching in front of her. Silence. No cars, no joggers, no customers. She blew out her breath and bounced in the grass with her bare toes, stopping only to adjust her cardboard sign for the billionth time, making sure the writing was visible to anyone who happened to pass her front yard and head deeper into the cul-de-sac. After counting 50 bounces, she straightened the tall stack of clear plastic cups and lifted the lid of her parents' red and white cooler to make sure the ice hadn't melted yet. She'd already spent an hour sweating in the shade of her treehouse. She wiped her damp forehead with her shirt sleeve. Someone would stop in soon. They had to. "How's business?" Mom smiled as she approached the card table and made a show of examining the full-to-the-brim pitcher. "Slow sale day?" Katy nodded. "Only 3 cars went by, and no one even looked at me." She kicked at a stray dandelion and chopped its fuzzy head off, sending feathery seeds scattering into the wind. Mom dug 2 quarters from the pocket of her grass-stained shorts, jutting her chin toward the cardboard sign. "Well, I'm thirsty after mowing the back lawn. Can I buy a cup?" "Sure." Mom dropped her coins into the empty mason jar, each one clattering to the bottom with an echo of failure. Katy spooned 3 scoops of ice into a cup and topped it off with a pour of fresh squeezed lemonade. "I'm never going to make enough money to buy a dog," she sighed as she handed Mom her drink. Mom took a sip. "I told you it would take a while to get enough for the shelter's adoption fee, but if you work hard and hold on to every penny, you'll get there eventually. Might not be this summer, but you'll just have to practice being patient." Mom drained her cup. Refreshing. I might need another one. She dropped 2 more quarters into the jar. "See, you have $1 already." "Only 149 left to go," Katy mumbled, being sure to hide her eye roll from her mother. Mom tugged on one of Katy's braids and cocked her head. "Have you prayed about it?" "About getting a dog?" Katy had prayed for a dog at bedtime every night for the past 6 weeks. Mom knew that. "About your lack of customers." "Oh, that." Katy scrunched her nose and frowned. She hadn't thought to ask God to send thirsty people her way. Might be a good idea. God cares about the little things in our lives, and He wants you to trust Him no matter what happens. "Okay." Mom emptied her second glass of lemonade and wiped her forehead. "I'm going to take a quick shower. Dad should be home from the store in about an hour. Maybe you can sell him a cup or 2 when he gets here. Dylan's in his room if you need anything." Katy nodded and settled into the chair behind her stand. She would be able to handle any customers that happened to come along. No need to stir her big brother out of his video game coma. Mom went inside, and Katy watched the white clouds inch across the sky. Maybe she should pray for some customers like Mom suggested. "God," she whispered, glancing over her shoulder to make sure Dylan hadn't come outside to spy on her. "God, can you help me make some money with this lemonade stand? I want to adopt a dog from the shelter. You know how much I want one. How much I need a—" She dampened her voice even more, her gaze darting to her house. "A friend, now that Emily's being really—" She abandoned the not-so-nice thought and swallowed hard. "Just, please, don't let it take very long for me to get a dog." She blew out her breath and blinked away the tears that itched underneath her eyelids. "Please." Katy straightened in her seat and peered down the road again. Nothing. She chewed on her bottom lip. This was going to take forever. A rustling in the bushes beside the house tore her attention away from the lack of traffic. Was that a squirrel or a chipmunk? No. It sounded bigger than a rodent. A fox? She swallowed hard. A coyote? Katy pushed off her chair and backed away from her stand as the rustling turned to crunching and snorting. A flash of brown fur peeked out from the leaves, and Katy's heart jumped to her throat. A bear! She opened her mouth to cry out for Dylan to rescue her when the creature bounded out of the shrubs, fully revealing its shape and size. Katy pressed her hand to her heart, feeling the clunky rhythm slow. It wasn't a bear. It was a dog. A big brown dog, with his tongue lolling from his mouth as he gave her a wide, goofy grin. "Wow, that was fast." Katy flitted her gaze heavenward before she examined the animal. Showing no fear, the dog trotted closer to Katy, panting heavily and whining with a thin squeak. "Oh, you poor thing! How long have you been walking? It's so hot out here." Katy flipped open the cooler lid and scooped a handful of slippery ice into her palms. "Here, eat this. I'll go inside and get you a bowl of water." She spread the pieces of ice on the grass in front of the dog, who sniffed the pile and licked up a cube to crunch. Stay here. I'll be right back." Katy held her hand out, palm down, trying to mimic the stay motion she'd seen others use with their dogs, then booked it into the kitchen. She opened and slammed cupboard doors until she found a shallow glass baking dish she could use as a dog bowl and flicked on the faucet. "What are you doing?" Dylan leaned on the doorframe between the kitchen and the living room without looking up from his handheld game console. "Just getting some water." Dylan nodded and went back to his room, gaze never leaving his screen. Katy tapped her foot as the water trickled into the baking dish. When it was halfway full, she called it good enough and pushed the lever down to stop the flow. She shoved the screen door open and let it fall into place with a bang. "Don't slam the door," Mom called from the bathroom. "Sorry." Katy cringed as she scooted back to the front yard, where the brown dog was licking the ground searching for more ice. "Here you go, boy. Good puppy." Katy set the dish on the ground, sloshing half the water over the lip of the dish in her haste. As the dog lapped up the water, she stroked his short fur. "You were thirsty, huh, boy?" She searched for a collar, but his neck was bare. "Where did you come from?" The dog finished his water and licked Katy's hand as if to thank her. He turned around 3 times and plopped down in the shade beside Katy's stand. She sat in the grass beside him and continued to run her hands along his soft fur and speak to him in gentle tones. Soon the dog rested his chin on Katy's bare knee and closed his eyes. Her heart expanded. "Who's this?" Mom had changed out of her yard work clothes and now wore a short-sleeved tunic and leggings. She strode over to Katy and squatted beside the dog. "I don't know. He just came out of the bushes over there while you were in the shower." Katy nodded her head in the direction the dog had come. "He doesn't have a collar." Mom pressed her lips together. "He must belong to one of the neighbors. We should bring him around and ask if anyone's missing a dog." Katy's heart sank to her dirty toenails. "I guess." "And if we can't find his owner that way, We'll bring him to the vet to see if he's microchipped. He looks well taken care of. Someone's got to be looking for him." Katy rubbed her fingers along the dog's silky ears, wishing Mom wasn't making so much sense. "Do you want to ask Dylan to run the stand for you while we take the dog for a walk to find his owners? Or are you going to close up shop for the day?" Katy gazed at her forgotten lemonade stand. "I'll close it up. Not like anyone was coming anyway." "Okay, I'll watch this big guy while you get everything put away. Then we'll take him for a walk. Tell Dylan where we're going and grab your jump rope in the garage. We'll use it for a leash in case he tries to take off." "'Kay." Katy brought the pitcher of lemonade to the fridge and placed the stack of plastic cups on the kitchen counter. She called to Dylan, telling him she was going for a walk with Mom, while she slipped on her sandals and went to the garage to find her jump rope. When she got back to the front yard, she handed Mom the rope and dumped the jar of quarters into her hand, shoving the money deep into her pocket. Mom made a loop in the jump rope and slid it over the dog's head. "Come on," she whistled, and the dog jumped to his feet. "Let's go find your family." They visited 15 houses. Katy's feet throbbed from walking, and sweat beaded on her forehead. 3 homes had been vacant, but the other 12 hadn't claimed the dog. None of the people they talked to had ever seen him before. "Well, I guess we'll have to take him to the vet," Mom said as they walked back home. "Is it open on Saturdays?" Katy held her breath. Mom licked her lips. "I'll call to check, but probably not." "So does that mean—" Katy didn't dare finish the question. "Yes," Mom sighed, but she was smiling. "We'll have to let him stay at our house until we can sort this out." "Yes!" Katy quickened her pace, and the dog on the other end of the rope matched her speed. They were going to have so much fun with a dog in the house. Katy could teach him tricks, and he could sleep at the foot of her bed, But don't go getting attached to him, Caitlin Joy. He has a family out there who's missing him very much, and we need to do the right thing and reunite them." Katy's mood dipped, but only a little. "What if we can't find his owners?" Mom frowned at that. "I don't think that will happen, honey. I'm sorry. You need to be prepared to hand him over when the time comes, okay?" Katy nodded, but Mom's warning bounced off her skin like a rock skipping across the creek. She gazed at the beautiful, glossy coat of the cutest dog in the world as he happily trotted beside her. Maybe, just maybe, this was God's answer to all of her prayers. Chapter 2. "I don't think that's a good idea." Mom pushed her salad around her plate Sunday after church. "He needs a name," Katy insisted as she glanced around the table, trying to get both Dad and Dylan on her side. "We have to call him something besides dog or boy, like we've been doing. It's getting confusing." Mom had posted the dog's picture to the town's social media page yesterday afternoon, and so far no one had even claimed to recognize him. They'd take him to the vet tomorrow to see if he was microchipped. If he wasn't, Mom would run an ad in the local paper on Thursday. If that didn't pan out, Katy was home free as the dog's new owner. She prayed last night that the dog would be hers to keep forever. "I guess it wouldn't hurt to call him something." Dad stabbed a piece of cucumber with his fork and offered Mom a shrug. "For clarity's sake." "We could call him Butch." Dylan gave the dog a pat on the head for once not bringing his game console to the table. "Or King." Katie scrunched her nose. "All right," Mom blew out her breath. "As long as you don't get too attached to him, you can give him a temporary name." At Katie's wide grin, she continued, "If you and Dylan can find a name you agree on." She folded her arms, obviously thinking the requirement would make the task impossible. Katie puffed out her chest. She wouldn't be so easily defeated. "How about Teddy? Like Teddy Bear?" She glanced at Dylan, who pretended to gag. "No way," he scowled. "Zeus." Katie shook her head. "Dumb." "Buddy?" "No, Killer." She held her hand out to the dog, who was grinning up at them and thumping his tail. "Does he look like a killer to you? Seriously, Dylan." "Okay, fine. I don't care what you call him. Just nothing too babyish." Dylan threw a crushed napkin on the table beside his plate. Katie looked at the dog and pressed her lips together. Dad had said the dog was a chocolate lab, so maybe something to do with chocolate. Candy? Cocoa? Hershey? Kisses? Brownie! Katie's mouth lifted in a smile as the dog's tail thumped faster. "Let's call him Brownie." "Fine." Dylan shoved a bite of salad into his mouth, giving up the fight. "For now," Mom cautioned her. "For now." Katie didn't let the reminder dampen her spirits as she scratched behind Brownie's ears. On Monday morning, Mom called the vet as soon as they opened. Katie didn't see the rush, but Mom said Brownie's real family was probably worried sick about him. If he had a real family. Katie had prayed again last night that God would let her keep Brownie forever, but her stomach twisted in knots as they climbed the front steps of the vet's office and opened the door to the air-conditioned waiting room. What if God took Brownie away? Her grip on the jump rope leash tightened, and she cleared the thickness from her throat. After a short wait, they were called into a tiny room where the vet greeted them with a warm smile and performed a brief exam of Brownie's eyes, paws, and mouth. "Please, please don't let him be chipped," Katie whispered under her breath as the vet waved a scanner around Brownie's shoulder blades several times in a figure-8 motion. I can't seem to find anything." The vet quirked her mouth to the side. "But he's a healthy weight, and his teeth and coat are perfectly clean and shiny. Someone's been taking excellent care of him, and he hasn't been wandering for long. We can put a flyer up in the lobby if you'd like. We don't have any male chocolates his age right now, so I don't think he belongs to any of our clients." Mom nodded and took a piece of folded white paper from her purse. "I have the ad for a found dog I'm going to place in the paper. Can you make a copy for your bulletin board?" The vet nodded, took the paper, and left the room. Katie eyed her mother, heat blooming in her cheeks. "You made an ad already?" Why was Mom so determined to get rid of Brownie? Didn't she like him? Even Dylan liked him, and Dylan didn't like anybody. Mom avoided eye contact. "We need to go to the newspaper office next since they couldn't find a chip. Brownie's real family needs him home, don't you think?" Katie shuffled her feet. "How would you feel if he got away from you and you didn't know where he was?" "Terrible." Katie pushed her fingers backward until they hurt. "Worried. Scared I'd never see him again." A queasy sensation fluttered in her stomach as she looked into Brownie's dark puppy dog eyes. Mom's voice grew quiet. "I'm sure that's how his family is feeling. Maybe there's a little girl your age missing him right now. We have to do our best to get Brownie to his rightful home. You know that, Katie, don't you?" Katie dropped her gaze and nodded. Okay, good. The vet returned with the ad, and Katie followed Mom back to the lobby. Mom checked out at the counter while Katie slipped her jump rope around Brownie's neck. The secretary chuckled as Katie stood. We have an old harness leash that's been sitting in the lost and found as long as I can remember. Would you like it? Might work better for you. Oh, that would be great, thanks. Mom accepted a frayed blue leash from the secretary and hooked Brownie up properly. Hope you find his owners. He's a handsome boy. The secretary gave a sad smile as if she could look inside Katie's chest and see her heart cracking in half. Katie squeezed the balled-up jump rope in her fists and ducked her head to hide the threatening tears. Chapter 3. The ad would run today. Everyone in town would open up the thin, crinkly pages of the local shopper and see Brownie's picture, clear as day, announcing a found dog. Every ping of Mom's phone caused Katie to cringe and pray Brownie's owners weren't demanding their dog back. The week so far had been heavenly. Katie and Brownie explored the woods, ran through the sprinkler, and played hide-and-seek in the backyard. She'd even taken him down to the creek to sit with her as she fished. He seemed content to sit at her feet and watch as she pulled the sunfish from the water and let it go again. Dylan had promised to help build a ramp to the treehouse on Saturday so Brownie could climb up there with her. Depending, of course, if Brownie was still around on Saturday. Now Katie slouched at the kitchen table, chin resting on her crossed arms, as she stared at the stove's digital clock. Mom's cell phone chimed, and Katie stiffened. Mom came in the room and swiped at the screen. It's just the church's chat group. Lori has a root canal tomorrow, and she's asking for prayer. Mom set the phone down and massaged her neck. Why don't you take Brownie outside to play? Nothing's going to get accomplished by you sitting here listening for a phone call that may never come. Katie perked up. That was the first time her mother had ever admitted Brownie might become a permanent member of their family. That had to be a good sign. Maybe Brownie would be hers after today. Okay. She scraped the kitchen chair on the floor as she pushed away from the table. Come on, Brownie, let's go. The dog scrambled to his feet and followed Katie out the door to the front yard. She grabbed a stick and played fetch with him until her arm was sore. Then she gave him a drink from the hose and took a long sip herself. She sat on the warm grass, stroking Brownie's fur, trying to think of what else she could do to distract herself from the ad in the paper. Oh, I know. Let me ask Mom if I can walk you to the ice cream shop. She never lets me go that far by myself, but she might if you're with me. Katie pushed herself off the ground and ran inside. Mom scrolled on her cell phone. Can I walk Brownie down to get ice cream at Sweetie's? Mom looked up and pressed her lips together. You've never walked that far by yourself before. I know, but I won't be by myself. Brownie will be with me. Mom still looked unconvinced. Please, Mom. She tried to mimic Brownie's sad eyes. I need to grow up sometime. At least that's what Emily had said. Oh, all right. Mom dug a $10 bill out of her purse. Walk there and straight back. No dawdling. And take my cell phone so you can call the house in case of an emergency. Katie snatched the phone and money out of Mom's hands and pulled Brownie's leash off the coat rack on her way outside. She called a thank you over her shoulder as the screen door slammed closed. Come on, Brownie. Let's go for a walk. Katie looped the leash over Brownie's body and tugged him close to her heel. The dog trotted beside her, tongue hanging out of his mouth as they traveled. "I don't think anyone's looking for you, boy," Katie admitted once they were out of sight of the house. "I think I'm going to be able to keep you." Gravel crunched under her sandals. "Which is great, because I don't have many friends anymore. Well, I don't have any friends, really. Not since Emily." Katie bit her lip, unable to finish the sentence out loud. Her mind kept on going, however, replaying the scene at recess a few months ago, when the snow had melted and mud puddles gathered across the playground. Katie had splashed in a few puddles as soon as she came outside from the stuffy classroom. After she had gotten the hem of her jeans sufficiently soaked, she looked for Emily. Spotting her best friend leaning up against the corner of the school building and chatting with someone, she sneaked up behind her, intending to entice her into a game of tag by poking her in the shoulder and running away. Emily shook her golden curls. "Oh, we're not best friends anymore. Not really. We're too different. Katie is still all about fishing and hiking and climbing trees. She's a tomboy. I don't even think she washes her hair every day." Voices around the corner giggled as Katie slipped behind a tree to hide and listen. She recognized the identical pink shoes poking out from the other side of the building. Bella and Grace. Emily kept going, oblivious to Katie's presence behind the tree. Katie wanted to plug her ears, but her body had turned to stone. "I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just interested in different things now. Makeup and jewelry, things like that. I've grown up, and she still thinks it's cool to catch frogs, grasshoppers, and fireflies, that's all." The girls giggled again. "Are you going to tell her?" Bella had asked. "I think she'll figure it out on her own," Emily said, "when she doesn't get invited to my birthday party next week." Katie had run inside to push her way into a bathroom stall and cry. Emily had been her best friend since kindergarten, and now she wasn't even going to invite Katie to her birthday party? What had she ever done to deserve that? Now, Katie approached Sweetie's ice cream shack. Apparently, everyone else in town had the same idea about cooling off with a frozen treat this afternoon. "Pretty packed today, boy." Katie dried her forehead with the hem of her shirt and patted her pocket to make sure the $10 bill was still there. "If I get a small, I might be able to get you a frozen doggy treat. I think they sell those here." Brownie lapped her fingers and Katie giggled, marching to the back of the line and leaning around the tall bodies to try and read the menu and prices. Several footsteps shuffled behind her. "Oh, it's Katie." Katie stiffened at the familiar voice and clenched her jaw. Why here? Why now? Why when she was hot and sweaty and her braids had loose hairs springing up all over the place and her shorts were caked with mud? She couldn't look more tomboy right now if she'd tried. She tightened her grip on Brownie's leash and blew out a breath before she turned around. Emily, Bella, and Grace eyed her. "Oh, hey." Her voice sounded as if someone had their fingers wrapped around her neck. "Hi." Emily shifted her weight and lowered her gaze. Her eyelashes were long and dark. Was she wearing eye makeup? After an awkward moment, Bella's gaze dropped to Brownie, and her face softened. "Is this your dog?" Katie lifted her chin and scratched behind Brownie's ears. "His name is Brownie. He's a chocolate lab. Purebred, I think." "He's so cute." Bella knelt down to pat him, and Katy relaxed her grip on his leash. The hand squeezing her throat loosened. "Where's your mom?" Emily's gaze flicked around the parking lot as she crossed her arms. "At home." "Oh, did Dylan bring you?" Katy scrunched her brow. "No, I walked over by myself." "Really?" Grace's eyes widened. Emily gave her a strange look. "Your house is like a mile away." "Well, Mom said it was okay, especially since Brownie would attack anyone who was even a little bit mean to me. Wouldn't you, boy?" Katy smoothed her hand against Brownie's head and raised an eyebrow up a notch, offering Emily a level gaze. Emily took a step back. Someone's phone chimed nearby, and Katy yanked her mom's cell out of her pocket, staring and tapping at the home screen like she was texting with someone. Bella and Grace looked at each other with wide eyes, elbowing Emily and whispering about how lucky Katy was to have her own cell phone. Katy smirked as she stared at the phone screen. Look who was more grown up than Emily now. The lady at the window called out, "Next!" "Well, that's me. Catch you later." Katy swiveled around and marched up to the window, ordering a small chocolate cone and a frozen dog treat, a sense of victory pulsing through her veins. When Katy returned home, her mom leaned heavily on the counter, cradling the landline in her hands, eyes red and puffy. "No." The word screamed in Katy's mind over and over until it wrenched from her throat. "No!" "Katy, honey, I am so sorry." Mom took a step closer, but Katy shrank away and pressed herself into the screen door, heart melting a little more with every beat. Mom leaned into the counter again. "His name is Mr. Carter. He's coming over in an hour to see if Brownie belongs to him." A flicker of hope lit in Katy's chest. Maybe this man would come over and see that Brownie wasn't his dog after all. Maybe she could still keep him. "Why don't you go outside and spend some time with—" Mom's voice cracked. Katy nodded and pushed her way outside. The muggy air suffocated her as she walked to where Brownie was laying on the grass. She stroked his fur, burying her sobs deep in his back. Raindrops dotted the bedroom window as Katy watched the oldest man she'd ever seen unfold himself from the front seat of his beat-up car parked in the driveway. "He can't be your owner, Brownie," she whispered to the dog as Dad walked over to greet the stranger with an umbrella and invite him inside. Thunder rumbled quietly in the distance. Brownie whimpered. "It's okay, boy." Katy massaged under his jowls. "You're safe with me." The screen door slammed, and Katy moved to open her bedroom door a crack so she could listen to her parents talk to the old man who claimed to be Brownie's owner. The stranger's voice traveled down the hallway. "I hope you have my Duke. I've really missed him since he took off." "Duke?" Katy rolled her eyes. What an awful name. That didn't have anything to do with chocolate at all. At the sound of the man's voice, Brownie whimpered again and nosed at the crack in the door, trying to push it wider. "What's the matter, boy?" Did the dog recognize the man? Could he really be Brownie's owner?
"I live by myself, you see. Have for 20 years. My son is in New York, so he doesn't get up here to see me much. Duke's really all I have."
A fist of guilt pinched Katy's insides as Brownie clawed at the door, whining to be let out. "Okay, boy, go ahead." Katy swung the door wide, and Brownie tore through the house, nails clicking and clacking on the hardwood floors. The man in the kitchen gave a delighted cry, and Brownie yipped happily. Katy stayed frozen in her doorway, the familiar sting of betrayal locking her muscles tight.
Duke! Okay, settle down now, the man chuckled. Good boy.
Metallic jingling sounded down the hall.
There, let's get your collar on, you little rascal. You gave me quite a scare.
Our 10-year-old has been taking good care of him for you, Dad said. She loves animals. Katy shut her door and collapsed face first on her bed. She couldn't listen anymore. Brownie was leaving with this stranger, and she couldn't do anything to stop it. Tears soaked her rumpled sheets until a soft rap came at the door. Katy sat up as Mom slipped into the room and shut the door behind her. Seems like they're going to chat for a while out there, so I thought I'd come check on you to see how you're doing. Do you want to say goodbye to Brownie before Mr. Carter takes him home? Katy was glad Mom hadn't called the dog Duke, but she didn't want the stranger or Brownie to see her like this, so she shook her head. Mom licked her lips and sat on the edge of Katy's bed. I'm really sorry, honey. She could have said, I told you so. I know you said he might have to leave, but I didn't want to believe it. I thought God had answered my prayers. Katy swatted at her tears with her palms, chest burning. She thought she'd finally had a loyal friend. Why didn't he? Mom gathered Katy in her arms. Oh, sweetie, he might. He might still answer that prayer. Sometimes he asks us to wait for his timing. That's all. Brownie belonged to someone else. You wouldn't want a dog that way, would you? By taking one away from a lonely person? Katy shook her head, even though she wasn't sure that was the truth. Why did God let me meet Brownie if he was just going to rip him away from me like this? Mom stroked Katy's braids. I don't know, honey, but I know God always has a good reason for our suffering, and he promises to bring something good from it. We have to hang on and trust that promise no matter how much our hearts are broken. That doesn't mean we can't be sad or cry, but we need to trust God knows best and will do what's best, always, even when it hurts. Silence dampened the room. Mom's words made sense, but they didn't make Katy feel any better. Besides, she wasn't sure she believed that good could come from bad. What good could come from Brownie being here for less than a week? And what good could come from Emily's rejection of Katy's friendship? A sharp constriction of her heart sent a fresh wave of tears trickling down her face, and she sniffed. Another knock on the door, and Dad poked his head in. He's heading out now. Katy jumped off the bed and pressed her forehead to the rain-dappled window as she watched Brownie hop into the back seat of the stranger's car. She blinked the tears away so she could watch the car turn around and head down the road. Dad put his hands on her shoulders. I'm sorry, sweetheart. Was that all anyone could say? Mr. Carter wanted me to tell you thank you for taking such good care of Brownie. Katy nodded, throat swollen. He said he would have gotten in touch with us sooner, but he didn't see any of the social media posts because his computer is on the fritz. I offered to come over on Saturday and see if I can fix it for him. Katy turned away from the window. You're going to his house? Dad tucked his hands behind his back.
Yeah.
Can you say hi to Brownie for me?
I was planning on it.
Dad kissed the top of her head. Katie smeared the tears away from her eyes with her palms. Thanks. It wasn't good enough, but it would have to do. Chapter 4. Katie squeezed half a lemon into the juicer and watched the yellow liquid trickle into the clear container. Dad had gone to Mr. Carter's house again this morning. He'd spent the last 3 Saturday mornings trying to fix the old man's computer and printer. Every week, Dad brought back a report of Brownie and recounted the dog's every move as Katie sat behind her lemonade stand and pasted on a brave smile, trying not to show that her heart was breaking. So, Mom strode into the kitchen. Think today will be a good sale day? Katie shrugged. The town's Independence Day parade would be strolling down Main Street in 30 minutes, and she was going to set up her stand at the end of the cul-de-sac instead of in front of her house to try and drum up more customers. I hope so. It had to be better than the last month of Saturdays where she'd only sold drinks to Mom, Dad, and a car full of ladies who were lost and came down the cul-de-sac asking for directions. She had 12 measly dollars to her name, not nearly enough to pay for the shelter's adoption fee. At this rate, she'd be able to buy a dog just before she died of old age. Katie separated the lemon juice into 2 even portions and poured the liquid into 2 pitchers. She measured out the water and sugar, stirring until everything was mixed to perfection. Please, God, send me a lot of customers today, Katie sighed. Praying the same requests over and over again felt pointless. God hadn't answered a single prayer of hers so far. Not for more customers, not for more money, not for Emily to be her friend again, and not for her to keep Brownie forever. Why did he keep saying no? What if God didn't want her to make enough money to adopt a dog? What if God didn't want her to have any friends? Katie pushed the thoughts out of her head. It didn't matter. She was going to get a dog no matter what. Dogs were loving, loyal, and they never turned their backs on you. Ready to get set up? Mom put the stack of plastic cups in a cloth grocery bag and lifted the cooler full of ice. Dad loaded your table in the back of the truck before he left. Katie smiled. Yep, let's do this. Business was booming. The parade had been delayed due to a horse wandering away from its rider, and the sun beat down on the onlookers, driving them to Katie's stand. Once a few people had tasted her homemade, fresh-squeezed lemonade, word got around that the stand at the end of the cul-de-sac was the place to go for a refreshing treat. Mom had gone back home twice already to refill the pitchers, and she also brought a box of popsicles from the freezer to sell since they ran out of lemons at home. Katie couldn't wait to count her money once the parade was over. A lemonade stand? That snotty, pinched voice could only belong to one person. Katie looked up from dropping a handful of purple popsicles into the cooler and scowled. Emily, Grace, and Bella stood in front of the stand, taking in Katie's sweaty red face. Mom stood 20 feet away, watching the parade finally making its way down the road. Isn't that a job for, little kids? Emily put her hands on her hips and snapped her gum. Katie wished she had her line of customers back, but the parade had distracted everyone. She didn't know what to say, so she kept her mouth shut. We'll take 3 cups. Emily slapped a $5 bill on the stand and glared at Katie. With shaky hands, Katie served her former friends their drinks. Emily took a sip, made a face, and then spit her mouthful on the ground with a dramatic cry. Ugh! Bella and Grace stood with open mouths as several members of the crowd turned their heads to see what the commotion was about. Katie's face grew hotter. I wouldn't drink that if I were you, Emily motioned to Grace and Bella. The girls obediently set their drinks back on the card table. We'd like our money back, please. Emily held out her hand as Katie fished out $1.02 to give back to the girl. Thank you. Emily marched away, Grace and Bella trotting after her. Hot tears ran down Katie's cheeks as she dumped out the full cups of lemonade the girls had ordered. That was 3 cups wasted, and her sales would plummet now that Emily was probably telling everyone within earshot how disgusting the lemonade at Katie's stand was. What had she ever done to that girl to make Emily hate her so much? Why had God let this happen? What good could possibly come from Emily's bad behavior? Katie sat down to watch the parade, and as soon as it was over, the crowd dispersed, no one even giving her a second glance or asking to buy another cup of lemonade. Katie crawled into bed, exhausted from the day. Even with Emily's little scene, she'd made $30 this morning. That brought her total up to 42. Only 108 left to go. The number seemed impossible to reach. How was she ever going to raise enough money? Once 5th grade started at the end of next month, she'd be too busy with homework to earn much money. Besides, it would get too cold to sell lemonade in the fall. Maybe Mom and Dad would finally agree to an allowance, or let her do odd jobs around the house or for the people at church for some extra cash. Katie blew out her breath. This goal of adopting a dog seemed unreachable, and God wasn't helping. Yes, she'd had one good sale day, but that wasn't enough, not even close to enough. Why was he allowing her to raise money so slowly? Didn't he care about her aching heart? She used to think Emily cared about her. Had God turned his back on Katie too? Hadn't she learned in Sunday school and church how much God loved her? How he'd sent Jesus to die for her sins? Then why wasn't he helping her with such a simple thing as getting a pet? Mom had said he might want Katie to wait. But what was wrong with owning a dog now? None of it made any sense. Katie rolled over and kicked her sheets away from her body, allowing her desk fan to cool her skin. Questions and doubts continued to swirl in her head as she fell into a fitful sleep. Chapter 5. Katie twisted the lacy hem of her skirt. She hated dresses. Why wouldn't Mom let her wear shorts to church like Mrs. Tucker's kids did? The uncomfortable clothing made it that much harder to concentrate on what the pastor was carrying on about week after week. Katie casually craned her neck to glance at the clock in the back of the sanctuary. As she did, a familiar face caught her attention. Mr. Carter sat in the back row, stroking his chin, looking deep in thought. The pastor closed the service in prayer, and Katie yanked on Dad's shirt sleeve. Look, it's Mr. Carter. Dad's face lit up with a grin. Oh, good. He finally made it. He gave Mr. Carter a little wave. Katie scrunched her nose. Finally? Dad nodded. I've been inviting him for weeks now. He's had a lot of questions for me about Christianity and church, so I suggested he come and see for himself what we did here. Dad herded the family to the back of the sanctuary, where Mr. Carter stood looking a little lost. Dad stuck out his hand.
"Howdy, Mr. Carter. How's your computer treating you?"
The old man shook Dad's hand.
"Good as new, Glenn. The printer, too. Thanks for your help with everything."
After the initial welcome and small talk, Mr. Carter shifted his weight.
"I wonder,"
He licked his lips.
"I wonder if I could talk to the pastor about a few things. I have some questions."
Dad appeared pleased with his request.
"Of course. Let me introduce you to him."
He led Mr. Carter toward the pulpit, where Pastor O'Brien stood, looking back once at Mom to give her a thumb up and a wide grin. "Well, that's an answer to prayer." Mom placed her hand over her heart. "What is?" Katie cocked her head. "Dad and I have been praying for Mr. Carter to be open to hearing about Jesus ever since he asked for Dad to come look at his computer."
"Oh."
Katie watched Mr. Carter shake the pastor's hand as she chewed on her lip, her heart in a vice. So, God was still in the business of answering prayers, just not hers. Chapter 6. Katie trudged to the end of the driveway to check the mail. Tomorrow was supposed to be another sale day, but she wasn't sure she could muster up the motivation to make another batch of lemonade, sell 2 or 3 cups to her family, and then put the full pitcher in the fridge to drink throughout the week. There had to be a better way to make money, a faster way. She'd have to talk to Mom about it later. She reached the end of the driveway, pulled down the mailbox lid, and felt around for the stack of flyers, advertisements, and envelopes that normally filled the space. She pulled out the pile of mail and flipped through it as she walked, looking for anything of interest. Among the white rectangular envelopes, a large bright blue square caught her attention. She fished it out from its place in the pile and shuffled it to the top. It was addressed to her. She scanned the return address. Wyoming. Only one person she knew lived all the way out there. Katie ran into the house and dropped the rest of the mail in a heap on the kitchen table, hurriedly tearing open the blue envelope and staring quizzically at the birthday card she held in her hands. Birthday? Didn't Gran remember Katie's birthday wasn't until November? As she opened the card, something small and green fluttered to the floor. Katie's eyes grew wide and her heart rate quickened. A $100 bill peeked up at her from between her feet. "What?" Katie screamed, then bit her lip, snatching the bill from the floor. Her head spun, and she sat down as dizziness swooped against her skull. She looked from the money to the open card with a neatly written explanation. "I heard about your quest to adopt a dog from the shelter. I thought you might like your birthday present early this year. Love, Gran." Katie giggled and shook her head as Mom flew into the room, Dylan by her side. "What are you yelling about in here?" Mom took in Katie's smile and leaned against the door frame, hand swiping her forehead. She frowned and jutted her chin toward Katie. "What is that?" "Look!" Katie held up the $100 bill and waved it in the air. "From Gran!" A thrilling tickle of excitement shot through her insides. $100! Can you believe it? Only 8 more to go, and I'll have enough. A laugh escaped her lips. Dylan turned around and left, probably to play more video games. Mom's eyes widened and her lips parted in shock. "She said it was an early birthday present." Katie blinked back the happy tears gathering in her eyes. Maybe God had answered her prayers after all. One of them, anyway. That's amazing, Katie. Mom crossed the room and wrapped her in a hug. Dylan reappeared and held out a fistful of crumpled bills.
Here.
Katie studied his face and wrinkled her nose. Huh?
Take it.
Dylan shoved the money at her.
It's $8. Now you have enough.
Mom let out a choked laugh, and Katie shoved to her feet. Really? Katie fingered the money and stared at Dylan, a lump forming in her throat.
Yeah, he shrugged. As long as you let me walk him and play with him sometimes.
Dylan's gaze dropped to his toes. Katie rounded the table and slammed her brother in a bear hug. Thank you, Dylan! You're the best big brother in the world! Dylan squirmed out of her grip.
Let's not get carried away.
He grinned and tugged on one of her braids. Katie spun around to address her mother. I have enough money! When can we go? Mom glanced at the stove clock and smiled. How about right now? The drive to the shelter took an eternity. Katie bit her lip to prevent herself from asking her mother for the third time how much longer it would be until they arrived. She squirmed and jerked forward to look out the front windshield, making the seatbelt wrench tighter around her chest. Thank you, God, thank you, Katie repeated the words in her mind over and over again. Now, Katie, remember, the shelter gets new dogs all the time. We can look at the dogs today, but if none of them are a good fit for our family, we can come back every week until we find just the right dog. Mom glanced at her in the rear view mirror with a pointed expression. Don't rush this process and get any old dog just to have a dog. We want to make sure to get the right one. Katie nodded, heart about to jump out of her chest. She could hardly squeak out a quick, okay. Mom turned on the car's blinker and slowed down, taking a right turn into a small parking lot next to a squat gray building. Here we are. Hands trembling, Katie unbuckled and threw open the car door, not waiting for Mom or Dylan before she charged up to the shelter's entrance. She pulled on the double glass door's handle, then pushed, then pulled, and pushed on the other handle. She frowned. Why wouldn't the doors open? Mom had checked the hours online. They should be open. Maybe they needed to be buzzed in or something. What's up? Mom and Dylan approached. It's locked! Katie's voice held an edge of desperation. Dylan tried both doors again as Mom placed her hands on her hips. What's going on? Katie huffed. Oh no, look. Mom pointed to a dirty note taped to the top of the door. Due to lack of funding, Harvest Hills Animal Shelter has been closed. All of our animals have been relocated to Rockland Animal Shelter. We apologize for any inconvenience. What? Katie's knees wobbled. What did that mean? She turned to Mom, who was tapping rapidly on her phone's screen. Okay, I found the website. Rockland Animal Shelter is an hour away and... Oh. Mom's face lost its color and her hand shook. What is it? Dread pooled in Katie's gut. Mom turned the phone so Katie could see the screen. Bold black letters screamed out at her. Adoption fee for all dogs and puppies, $300. Katie struggled to suck in enough air to push away the darkness eating at her vision and swiped her hand out toward the glass doors to stop herself from tumbling to the ground. $300? $300? That was twice as much as she'd needed before. That was impossible. She'd never raise that much money, never in a million years. Chin trembling, she turned to Mom for answers, but her mom looked just as stricken as she did. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart." Somehow, Katie managed to stagger back to the car and strap herself into the back seat without throwing up. She glared up at the sky and clenched her teeth. "Why do you hate me?" Mom and Dylan joined her in the car, and they drove back home in silence. Chapter 7. Katie slouched behind her lemonade stand in the front yard. She'd slammed the lemons in the hand juicer so hard this morning, it wouldn't surprise her if the drink was extra tart today. Oh well, it wasn't like anyone was going to taste it anyway. She'd been set back to where she was a month ago, needing to raise $150 to pay the shelter's adoption fee. At least Dylan hadn't asked for his money back yesterday. He'd even offered to let Katie play on his game console last night, but Katie declined. Mom had given her an extra scoop of ice cream for dessert, and Dad had suggested she be the one to choose the family game night board game from the closet. But nothing any of them did could fix this. Katie would never have a dog. She'd never have a loyal friend. She'd never have anything she really wanted. She crossed her arms as constriction in her chest quickened her breathing. It wasn't fair. Happy voices called out from down the road, and Katie sat up straighter. Maybe she'd have a few customers today so she could get a good start on raising yet another $150. Bike tires whizzed, giggles and shouts sounded nearby, and before Katie could recognize who was coming and run inside, Emily, Grace, and Bella shot into view. "Hey, it's Katie!" Grace waved. Katie frowned. She was not in the mood to deal with these three girls today, but Emily's slow pace suggested she had other ideas. "Oh, look, she's selling more yummy lemonade." Emily let her heels drag on the pavement and brought her bike to a stop in front of Katie's yard. "Where's your dog?" Bella stopped her bike behind Emily and scanned the area. The question struck like an arrow through Katie's soul, and hot tears sprung to her eyes. Emily whistled a call. "Brownie! Brownie! Come here, boy!" When silence greeted her, she dropped her bike on the edge of the lawn and approached Katie with a wicked smirk. "Well, where is he?" Katie bit the inside of her cheek, pulled her arms tighter around her body, and dug her nails into her skin. "That dog you had the other day? He wasn't even yours, was he?" A triumphant look passed over her features as she laughed and glanced at the other girls. "I bet that cell phone wasn't yours either, was it? Probably belonged to your mommy." Katie's glare flew to Emily's twisted face, and she pressed her lips together to keep herself from admitting the truth. But Emily must have seen the confession in her eyes. "I thought so." She strode back to her bike and picked it up. "Come on, girls. We have better things to do than hang out with this liar. What a baby!" Bella and Grace gave Katie sad looks, but pedaled after Emily as quickly as their legs could carry them. Katie uncrossed her arms and pounded her fists on top of the card table, heart slamming against her rib cage. How dare those girls come over to her house just to harass her? What was wrong with them? "Stupid lemonade!" She swept her hand to the right and knocked her stack of plastic cups onto the ground, scattering them all over the grass. "Stupid Emily!" She kicked the cooler over, and the top popped open, letting the ice spill into a pile on the ground. "Stupid shelter!" She grabbed the front lip of the card table and heaved it over, causing the pitcher of lemonade to crunch as it landed, letting its contents soak into the soil. "Stupid Mr. Carter!" She let out a loud cry as she kicked over her chair and collapsed to the ground, sobbing until her throat grew raw. She hardly noticed when a pair of warm hands led her into the house, and her mother's calm voice mumbled words of comfort into her ear. Katy sat cross-legged on her bed, hugging her old, tattered stuffed bear and staring out the window, Mom stroking her snarled braids. She'd stared out this window when Emily said those mean things behind her back at school, and when she didn't invite Katy to her birthday party, and when Brownie was taken away, and when they'd found the shelter closed, wondering why God had allowed those things to happen, if he loved her as much as her parents claimed he did. "I understand why you're upset." Mom's voice broke into her thoughts. "You worked so hard to meet your goal, just to have the finish line moved out of reach. I'd be angry too." Katy turned to meet Mom's gaze. "It's not just that," she sniffed. "So many things have gone wrong lately." "Can you tell me about it?" Katy looked out the window again. "It started with Emily." Mom shifted. "You never told me what happened between you two, just that she wasn't your best friend anymore." Katy's eyes brimmed with tears again, and she brushed them away with an angry stroke of the back of her hand. "She said I was a tomboy, told the other girls I was a baby, that I needed to grow up, and she didn't invite me to her birthday party. Worse than that, she makes fun of me in front of Grace and Bella, and they don't do anything to stop her." Mom squeezed Katy's hand. "Honey, I didn't know it was that bad. You should have told me." "What can you do? You can't make her stop either." "No, but I could talk to you, comfort you, pray for you." Katy scoffed. "What?" "I don't think God would help me." Mom let Katy's hand go. "Why not?" Katy's throat burned. "Because he let Emily be mean to me. He didn't let me keep Brownie, and he let that shelter close down, so now I don't have enough money to adopt a dog." Katy let her gaze drop to her lap. "I think he wants me to be miserable." "Oh, honey, that's not true." Mom shifted her body to face Katy more fully. "God loves you, and he proved that love by sending his son to die for your sins. He always has good reasons for why things happen, even bad things. He can work all of this out into something good. You're just in the middle of the working right now, that's all. One day it will make sense, even if that day is in heaven. But someday you'll see that he worked it all out for his purposes." Katy shrugged. "I don't know." Mom pointed to the destroyed lemonade stand outside the window. "How do you make your lemonade?" "Huh?" "Just answer me. How do you make it?" Katy let out a ragged breath. "By squeezing the juice out of the lemons, then adding sugar and water and stirring it up." "What did lemonade making have to do with anything?" "Does the lemon juice taste good by itself?" Mom gave a knowing smile. Katy frowned. "No, it's disgusting." "Right. There's an old saying that goes, 'If life gives you lemons, make lemonade.' But I think there's a better way to think of it. When God allows a sour situation to enter your life, trust that He can make something sweet from it. Katie shook her head. But what good can come from losing Brownie, from the shelter closing, from Emily being so mean to me? Her throat clogged and choked out her words, making them sound strained and hysterical. I don't know, honey. Maybe, Mom licked her lips. Maybe God wants you to make other friends at school instead of spending every second with Emily like you used to. Is there another girl in your class who might need a friend? Katie swallowed and scratched her wrist. I don't know. Maybe Rosie, but she acts so different. What do you mean? She has something, some kind of problem that makes her shout out loud noises in the middle of talking. Some of the other kids make fun of her. Like Tourette's syndrome? Mom squinted at Katie. Yeah, I think that's what Mrs. Landry called it. Well, there you go. Maybe God wants you to befriend Rosie now that you have something in common. You both understand how crummy it feels to be teased by the other kids. Katie furrowed her brow. Maybe. But that didn't explain why Brownie had to be taken away just when she'd grown attached to him, or why the shelter had to be closed just as she'd gotten enough money to adopt a dog. God loves you, Katie. He does. Sometimes we don't understand why He's doing what He's doing, but that's just because we're human and He's God. We need to trust Him with everything, especially our pain. Katie nodded, but her mind swirled. Could God have allowed Emily to break off their friendship so Katie would see Rosie's need for a friend? She chewed on the inside of her cheek. It was possible, but she wasn't sure. Let me pray with you, sweetie. Then you need to wash your face and clean up your lemonade stand. I'll help you. I think it might be good to take a break from selling it for a while. Katie obediently bowed her head, but the stabbing hurt in her heart drowned out every word of her mother's prayer. Chapter 8. Mr. Carter stood in front of the congregation after Pastor closed the morning service in prayer. The old man pressed a hand against his trembling jaw. Katie swung her legs back and forth under the pew. What was going on? Mr. Carter cleared his throat.
I asked Pastor O'Brien if he'd allow me to address the congregation this morning. You may not know me very well, but the only reason I dared to darken the door of this church is because Glenn Fisher invited me. Since I'd grown to respect him, I agreed. Funny thing is, the only reason I met Glenn in the first place is because my dog escaped one morning while I was visiting a friend. That rascal ran across town straight into Glenn's yard. Course I didn't know where in the world he'd gotten off to.
He glanced at Katie's family sitting in their regular pew.
When I lost Duke, I searched for him day and night. Finally, after my 5th fruitless night of searching, I was at the end of my rope. So I prayed. I'd never prayed before. Never saw the need for it, honestly. The morning after I prayed, I went out and searched for Duke one last time. Couldn't find him. I'd lost all hope of ever getting my dog back. He was long gone, or so I thought. I picked up my mail on my way home, settled into my armchair, and opened my weekly shopper. And there, clear as day, was Duke's picture printed in black and white. I could hardly believe my eyes. God had answered my prayer.
Mr. Carter swiped at his wet cheeks.
After I went to pick up Duke, and Glenn offered to come look at my broken computer for no charge, well, all that got me thinking. Maybe God was trying to get my attention. So, when Glenn talked about God, I listened. And when he invited me to come to church, I eventually agreed. It took losing my best friend to get me to see my need for a savior. It wasn't fun at the time, but looking back now, I see why it had to happen. I don't think I would have ever believed in Jesus otherwise.
Mr. Carter nodded to Pastor, and they swapped places behind the pulpit.
Mr. Carter has asked to be baptized into our church this summer, so we will be scheduling that real soon.
Pastor dismissed the congregation, and many people approached Mr. Carter and shook his hand, including Dad. Mom's words from yesterday came to Katie's mind. God was able to take a sour situation and turn it into something sweet. God had used Mr. Carter's dog's escape for something good, even though no one knew it at the time. She'd asked Mom why God had brought Brownie to her just to take him away again, and now she knew. Mr. Carter needed to meet Dad. He needed salvation. And Duke needed a safe place to stay while God got Mr. Carter's attention. If God could use Mr. Carter's lost dog for good, then God could turn her heartbreak into something good too. Okay, God, I think I get it. You're doing things I can't see, and you're working the bad stuff into something better. I don't know why I can't have a dog right now, but you do. I don't know why Emily is being mean, but you do. Maybe Mom is right, and I should try to be friends with Rosie. Or maybe you want me to realize that I don't need a best friend beside you. Or maybe both. I think I get it now. And I will trust you to work everything in my life out, in your way and in your time, not mine. I'll trust you to let me raise the rest of the money when you want me to. Thank you for helping me understand. Peace flooded Katie's soul, and the tension she'd carried in the back of her neck since learning about the new shelter fee loosened. She looked up as Dad approached their pew. "Hey, gang, Mr. Carter invited our family over for lunch at his place," he said. Mom smiled brightly, and for the first time in a long time, Katie did too. Dad rolled into Mr. Carter's driveway and parked the car. Katie couldn't wait to get inside and play with Brownie again. Mr. Carter stepped out of his car and strode to his front door. After fiddling with the doorknob, he turned around to greet Katie's family coming up the walkway.
"Before we go in, I have something I need to tell you."
He shoved his jangling key ring in his pocket.
"The day Duke got out, we were visiting a friend. I don't know if I said that this morning at church. I was so nervous, I can't remember what I said." He chuckled. "Well, the friend I was visiting is actually a breeder. Duke sired some purebred lab puppies a few months ago, and we had come to visit them in the backyard. The fence was broken, and Duke escaped. Well, my friend felt so terrible that Duke got out on his property that he offered me the pick of the litter for my trouble. Of course, I'm too old to keep up with the puppy, so I was going to decline his generous offer. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I knew a little girl who might be able to give a little pup a good home.
A soft scratching noise clawed at the other side of the door. Katy covered her cry with her hand as Mr. Carter opened the door, and a wriggly little ball of fur with the palest yellow coat she'd ever seen tumbled outside and pounced on her dress shoes. Her heart squeezed so hard she thought she might faint. She cleared the emotion from her throat as the old man placed the puppy in her arms and she stroked its soft, fuzzy head. Mom and Dad laughed, and Dylan let out a stunned "Whoa!" "Well," Mr. Carter crossed his arms and beamed at Katy. "What do you think?" "Thank you!" She blubbered the words, half to Mr. Carter, half to the God who answered her prayers in His perfect way, in His perfect time. "Thank you! Thank you so much!" She flicked tears away from her lashes. She never imagined she'd be able to have a brand new little puppy to call her very own. She couldn't believe what God had done for her. If she'd already adopted a dog from the shelter the other day, she pushed that thought out of her head. God had known all along what He was doing. He did love her. Katy could trust His plan. She nuzzled her face in the dog's downy yellow fluff, drying her tears with the warm fur. "You're welcome, child. Now, what are you going to name her?" Mr. Carter hitched an eyebrow. Katy held the tiny, wriggling body snug against her chest. "It's a girl?" "Sure is." Katy gazed at her new pet nipping at the ends of her braid, remembering Mom's words of wisdom from yesterday. God really could take the most sour circumstances and turn them into something sweet. She let a carefree giggle escape from her lips. "I think I'll call her Lemonade."